Right, how are you doing everybody? Welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're going to be taking a closer look from a side-on perspective of my golf swing. I'm going to be hitting a 58-degree lofted wedge. I'm going to be hitting my 8, my fairway wood and my driver. Fairway wood is a forward and driver 10.5 degrees, just in case any of you are intrigued by that. I would class myself as somebody who possesses a pretty traditional golf swing when it comes to professionals. Now, there are many varieties of different golf swings, but fundamentally when it comes to functionality and movement, generally speaking, when we look at golfers on the gents and ladies tour, there are huge similarities of which I feel like I kind of possess. So hopefully we can look at this swing and we can learn and, you know, hopefully find it really, really beneficial. I'm somebody as a professional golfer who would class themselves as average in terms of distance, not somebody, before we get it in the comment section, who hits it absolutely miles as far as some tour pros, but you know, average nevertheless. So if we kind of get stuck in, well, like I said, we're going to be looking at the 58-degree wedge. We're also going to be looking at the 8 fairway and the driver. So I think we'll kind of focus on different things essentially on the different types of golf swings. So when it comes to the first swing, I think all that we're going to kind of focus on is that, if we just bring this back to the beginning, is probably the posture. So what we can kind of see in the posture, which is the most important area, is this sort of region here. So we can see the way that there's no excessive sort of curve of the spine, i.e. the spine kind of moving unwantedly in terms of that sort of curve. So we can see the spine looks pretty nice and neutral, which basically, the problem that you would have when the spine is too excessively curved is that essentially you're going to find it restrictive and you're going to find rotational movement pretty hard. So posture, this is a 58, so not trying to hit it with a huge amount of distance, but what we can see, width of stance, balance position in the finish would also be worth a note. And you know, generally we can learn a few things from the posture to get started when we're looking at the 58-degree lofted club. Now, let's progress on to the 8-iron. So what we're going to see with the 8-iron is, again, very, very similar traits in terms of the posture. In the backswing position, what we're going to do with the iron, let's speed this up a little bit. So what we're going to do with the iron is that we're going to focus very much on plane. So we'll kind of play this through first. Okay, so we'll play that all the way through towards the end, and then we'll rewind it back to the address position. So if I was to draw a line pretty roughly right through the heel of the golf club up through the elbow plane, what we would generally see is that as the club goes back, we can see the way the club shaft pretty much works through that plane line up towards the top of the backswing position. Again, see the shaft is pretty much parallel towards it, swinging up towards the top. As I transition, you can see the way that the shaft slightly shallows from the angulation that it went up on, but again, it's pretty parallel towards the plane line. So the shaft starts to come through the shoulder plane, comes down through the elbow plane, and then back through the hand like so. And then as it travels its way down, you can see the way the shaft runs through the plane line, kicks out a little bit coming in towards that impact area, and then essentially swings through. So there's a decent amount of consistency generally when it comes to the sort of iron play that I would possess. And I think one of the reasons for that is I have a pretty sort of traditional plane axis essentially, which gives me a decent amount of consistency when it comes to hitting the irons. So far that's kind of what we can see when it comes to some consistency. Let's progress onto the woods. Now, what we're going to focus on this time round with the fairway woods is that we are going to look more at the body. So in terms of how the body would be moving from the side-on perspective. So we've talked a little bit about posture, and we've also talked a little bit about plane. But what we're going to try and focus our attention on now is the body. So if I was to just zoom in here for a moment and draw a line up across the back of the hips, and then just take the swing back. So we can see in the takeaway position, like we saw earlier, pretty traditional. Now, slight distortion in the camera because it's a longer club. Probably should have moved the camera more towards the left, but I'm slightly restricted in the garden, so that's why there's a little bit of distortion in terms of how things will look across now using the fairway wood and also the driver. but still enough for us to pick things out of. What we can see is takeaway, not excessive amounts of lower body action. As I swing up towards the top, we can see from the original position of the hip, which was represented by that yellow vertical line, we can now see the way the right hip has worked behind that line. Now, that's a really, really important feature in the golf swing. So this basically is retaining your posture and your angles. So then as I transition, as I pull my left hip back, you can see the way that basically both hips are now back on that line. And then as I continue to rotate through, now there's more weight on the left, so the right hip would start to come forward. You can see how the right elbow and the right hip really work in unison. And then, like I say, shaft comes down on plane, hips really open up. And again, a pretty sort of athletic position. Now we have obviously many more tour pros that would hit the ball, you know, much better and much further than I do, right? So, but again, we can see that a lot of the stuff that I talk about on the channel are things that I can do myself in terms of opening up the pelvis, coming in towards the hit, but more importantly, if we just zoom up again, this ability to get the pelvis back to square. And then again, the same sort of release. So that's from that side on perspective, what we have basically seen when it comes to the fairway wood. And what we're going to do now is we're going to conclude this lesson by looking at the driver. So again, slight distortion in the camera angle, which we'll see. But what we're going to look at in this proportion now of the golf swing, if we just play it through once, is we're going to focus much more our attention on the trail leg and again the transition. So from this side on perspective. So again, pretty traditional in terms of how the shaft's moving, how the release is working and all the rest of it. So I'm not too concerned about that. But if we have a look again, and what we're going to focus on this time is the right leg. So as I take the club back, there's very little rotational movement in the first part of the move. So in the first part of the takeaway, I should say. Then as we swing up towards the top, this is when we'd be starting to rotate the lower body more, but we can still see the way I keep flexing the leg. Now, of course, the right leg is going to straighten, but I personally feel that the right leg should straighten depending on how much rotation you're creating on the pelvis. I'm not a massive fan of straightening the right leg for the kind of sake of it, essentially. So the right leg stays flexed, which would also mean that because the leg is staying flexed, putting pressure in towards the ground. Now, as I transition and I start to pull the left hip back, because I've got the right hip working back and deep, and there's enough pressure underneath the right leg, this helps me open the pelvis very quickly. So by the time I pause at left arm horizontal, you can see the way the pelvis is actually open relative towards the target line. Now this is a big area. So this is when the pelvis would be kind of theoretically working at its fastest rate of rotation between the top of the backswing position here and between left arm horizontal here. So we can see the way the pelvis is creating that amount of rotation, and you can kind of see roughly from that bottom. You probably can't actually, but in terms of the time frame, we're talking absolutely nothing. So this is when the pelvis would be working really quickly. And that's why I think the backswing and loading is really important to help you open the pelvis without losing angles in the early part of the swing. Club comes down on plane, release, fine. Obviously can't see ball flights, but generally don't think that's a massive problem anyway for the subject of this video. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to carry this on. I'm going to get some different camera angles as well, just because obviously camera angles can potentially distort the image. So you're going to get some from, shall we say, the target line view, and then going to get some from an above camera angle perspective as well. So hopefully you enjoy the video. Always appreciate a thumbs up and a like. Remember, it's absolutely free to press that subscribe button. If you're going to do so, press the little bell icon. Catch up with you guys again soon.